right. Well, Adam and Josh Bigelsen, I am so looking forward to our conversation today. Your work, which is rooted in the legacy of your father, Dr. Harvey Bigelsen, is more than just a continuation now. It's an evolution of what he started many decades ago. And you both inherited this paradigm shifting approach to health and the body and treating it as this living, communicating organism and system that we get to interact with and really listen to. And through your understanding of what you've termed the terrain paradigm versus terrain theory and pleomorphism and live blood analysis, you bring something back into medicine that has been, very intentionally written out of it. And that is the nuance and the individualism of the body, and really our experience within the body. And your treating of symptoms, not just as these isolated problems, but really messages that we are getting. And if we're paying attention, ways that we can actually take control of or charge of what's happening within the body. In a world that really just seems to systematize or overly protocol things, you are bringing the individual person back into their own health. And you give a voice to the vitality of blood and the messages that it's trying to communicate with us. So to start things off, could you talk a little bit about your work with your father and growing up with him and how that time in your lives and everything he was involved in shaped your current beliefs and your current practices in health and in what we would say medicine now?
Yes, thank you for the introduction. Very nice, yes. And you did some of your homework, which is awesome. So we appreciate that. Terrain paradigm, terrain model, not a theory. That's what we say. Growing up with Dad was very interesting. Josh and I, most of us in general as humans, we always feel a little bit unique and alien-like. How much do we really relate to what's going on in this crazy world? So as Josh and I grew up with Dad, things were a little different for us. I saw Dad as the rich eye surgeon. And as we were in New Jersey, and he was kind of fat and unhealthy, and we had junk food, and it was awesome. And then I saw him change. I went from Captain Crunch to Grape Nuts, and Grape Nuts, I don't like Grape Nuts, boo. Once you eat sugar frosted flakes and things like that as a kid, you want sugar all the time. But watching Dad change his work was really interesting for me. I remember as a kid, we lived in Princeton, New Jersey. Dad was a rich eye surgeon. We had the Porsche and the Jaguar, and we didn't have art on our walls. We had artists paint on our walls. So he was in his 30s, and he said he had nearly everything he'd ever wanted, and he was near suicidal. And what he did was he moved us out to Arizona. He took a huge cut in pay. He found out about homeopathy and the work of Edgar Casey, things like that. And all of a sudden, he was thrilled with what he was doing. I remember this as a kid, Dad coming home from work and saying, oh, this person came in and they had this, and we did this, and this happened. He was excited. So as a child, I wish that every child could see their father enjoying their work, and it was just neat for me. And to ask my dad questions was great. With Josh and I, our upbringing was part of Dad's evolution. So he did get to go travel the world and see wild treatments, and he saw the microscope in Canada. And then I got sick, and I had this mononucleosis so bad I was showing minor signs of hepatitis. And now Dad had a reason to try to use this microscope. And he found this doctor on an Indian reservation or a Native American reservation in the United States. And they worked together on my case, and things changed. So, Josh and I, we were the guinea pigs, definitely. I remember going to school sick. It's, Dad, I feel fine. I'm throwing up. Come here, let me give you a shot. No more shots. So definitely a unique experience, even to the point where, our friends always thought we were a little crazy. Dad was always a little crazy, but he always talked to our friends and answered their health questions, and things always made sense that way, So Josh's story is a little different, as he saw Dad more into the natural life. And then Josh actually ended up working with Dad, so we were very involved with our family. Let's just say that, our family was very close. Dad loved his work. We were a part of what went on with his work. And then as Josh got kind of sucked into working with Dad, it was kind of like there was no escape for us. This was just something we were born to do, basically.
Yeah, I think it was what Tom Callan asked me when did I first learn about this terrain approach. And I didn't, I never knew any different. Adam caught the tail end of Dad, being a surgeon. And, I didn't get that piece of the puzzle. I just kind of grew up with, this horrible health food that we're eating when we were young. And, and when my friends, would have health issues, Dad would do some witch doctor stuff over them and they would fix them, So it wasn't until, probably 2014, when our clinic got closed in 2014 and I moved up to the Pacific Northwest and I started working with alternative practitioners, was the first time I realized that not all doctors were helping people. So I didn't realize how unusual what my dad did was until I started working with other practitioners. So I figured you go to a doctor, you get better. That's what happens. And when I saw that, especially in the alternative world, I just didn't see those same results going on. And I saw people blaming, your germs for your problems, the bacteria, the fungus. Everybody wants to blame your parasites, these days. And everything they were talking about was wrong, I believe. It really went against my beliefs. At that point, I didn't know how to explain it. I was so busy. I'd worked with Dad on and off since 1989, and then side by side for, the past 15 years until he passed. And I just didn't understand people's approach. So as this was going on, I'm working with these different practitioners who would bring me in because of my dad. And I would listen to them talk to clients, and I wouldn't agree with anything they were saying, except I didn't know how to explain it. I was just used to doing the work. So I would sit there and I would kind of clench. And one of the girls I work with, she's like, Josh, I could feel you clenching over there. It's like, yeah, you're doing stupid stuff. So I developed a case of TMJ, because I would sit there and I would just hold it in. So it really wasn't until 2014, 2015 where I really started to realize that we had a bit of a different approach. And I really didn't agree with what was going on with traditional medicine and to an extent, alternative medicine. And when I talk about alternative medicine, I don't include Ayurvedic medicine and Eastern philosophy in that. I think that is traditional medicine, and that's what we should be following. But it was an eye-opening experience. It was a teeth-clenching experience for me. And it set us on the path for what we're doing now. And honestly, I probably wouldn't be doing this right now if it wasn't for Adam. I'd been working in, the healthcare system for so many years, and I was over it. Dad passed away. I was angry. I was bitter about it, and COVID happened, and Adam kicked ass and got things in the gear. And we've been doing these courses for 3 or 4 years now. So, if it wasn't for him, I'd probably be out fishing somewhere, talking to the birds, which I do anyways. But I wouldn't probably be doing this, but the message is too important to let it die.
I'm glad you're still doing it because it's, as we were talking about before I hit record here, it's kind of now like the time in the collective and in, human consciousness where I think more people are waking up to the power that they have over their own health and the agency we have over our health, and really the misdirection that has been very intentionally cultivated through, media, education, our professional organizations, like all of these ways that have been systematized to misdirect us as far as health goes. And speaking to that a little bit, we were touching on terrain paradigm. Would you mind going into what does that mean to you when you say terrain paradigm? What are you referring to for someone who's maybe listening and isn't entirely familiar with what that would mean?
Sure. Yeah, the terrain, this goes back to Pasteur and his rival Antoine Béchamp. So, and Claude Bernard was another one. So Pasteur says it's the germ that causes the issues and attacks the body. And the opposite side of that, the terrain perspective is it's not the germ, it's the terrain the germ lives in. It's the environment the germ lives in. So the idea that a beginning botany student knows the plant is diseased because of the soil that it's in. All right. So our terrain is literally everything. All right. Your health issue can be, your liver issue can be the idea that your body's out of alignment, putting pressure on the liver. All right. There's something affecting the energy to the liver with a tooth and the meridians going on there. It can be an anger issue. All right. Anger issue can be a result of the job that you have, the house that you live in, the people that you're living with. All right. So the terrain is really everything. Living in certain environments, we feel good, and different things for different people. And we're very interesting creatures because self-abuse is a wonderful thing for us, right? We have to work. I hate this job, but I got to do it, and the reality is the job can literally eat away at you. The relationships can eat away at you. So the terrain is literally everything. It's the room I'm in. It's the neighborhood I'm in. It's the people that I'm with. It's the food that I eat. It's the place I get my food from. It's all going to affect us. All right, our physical environment, just a place that's hot is going to create different things than a place that's cold. And we see as people get older, and they retire in places like Florida and Arizona, warmer places, which is different for people maybe with arthritis, right? Heat makes things expand. So the terrain really is everything.
Yeah, the terrain is all. But I think really the basis for it is that we are part of nature and we evolve as nature does. And nature evolves through symbiosis. It does not evolve through antagonism. And these are the two biggest trains of thought that we've had, with Pasteur, we're being attacked by everything, and Béchamp's like, no, the terrain is where the microbiology is reacting to the terrain. We even take it to Darwin being wrong. I'm not on certain things, but Darwin being wrong as far as survival of the fittest goes. So if I'm stronger than you, then I win, so I have to be strong. Whereas his rival we teach a lot about is Lamarck, who preached symbiosis, right? The plant, the animal eats the plant has to adapt. Now the animal is evolving along with the plant. This is how we evolve. It's through symbiosis. And we live in a society now where people think we're separate than nature. Dad was taught, in medical school that the human body was exempt from the laws of nature, right? And we've created such big disconnect, even right down to the very shoes we wear, the roads we're walking on, that we're so disconnected from nature that we think we're separate from it. And the difference between the soil and the ground out there and the soil in my body, there is no difference. The microbiology reacts the same exact way. Parasites are good in the soil. Why aren't they good in your body? You think we're different than nature? No, we're the same way. And microbiology is reacting to our terrain. It's all there to either assist or help us decompose, just as in nature. So that's one of the biggest things we try to get across is that we are a part of nature and we evolve through symbiosis, not antagonism.
And speaking to traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic practices, these lines of approaches to health and traditional wisdom, they don't pin anything on germs or bugs. You're not, when you investigate or learn within these realms, you don't learn about, bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi. Like they don't even talk about any of these things. Not that some of them aren't real, but, to what you were just saying, Josh, it has nothing to do with what's actually happening inside of you. There is as far as disease goes, like these aren't the causes for these types of things, but there is really just this symbiosis that happens between us, the human us, and all of these things in our environment. And we have been really, sold the story of germs and how evil all of these invisible little bugs are that are attacking us all the time, that it's hard to see around that. But when you do, it just makes so much more sense and gives you so much power back.
Yes. That's what's great about what we do, Nirvani. Yes. That's what we do about what we do is we educate and empower people. When we do one of these blood consultations and we tell people it's not all their fault. The body is so compressed from birth and it's putting pressure on the organs. And this is one reason they're having the emotional issues because, lungs are grief. And you have so much compression on the lungs that you're having difficulty processing grief. And then people realize, oh, wow, I've been trying so hard. Yeah, we do our best. But sometimes it's not our fault. But then when you realize what's going on and nature does nothing in isolation, you find the right body worker to take pressure off things. And all of a sudden, you get this sigh of relief and things start to shift. It's the little things in life, really, and it's fun with what we do because as we educate and empower people, the reality is we give people information and ideally they take some action on that information. What we appreciate are the open-minded skeptics. You want to see for yourself. I do, So you listen to the information. It makes sense. It always makes sense what we say with what goes on in the body. There's never these weird things where it's like, well, that one you don't understand because I'm the expert and you don't get it. Always makes sense. But then you take action on these things, and then let's talk about what's going on. That's where things get fun, because people go, wow, you're right. I just did my Qigong yesterday for 20 minutes before work, and I felt different. I did a little breathing exercise at lunchtime today, and it was so much easier to get through my afternoon. Things like that. It's the empowering aspect of what we do. I get great joy out of watching people get it. Know that they have the power. Know that where they're at is part of what they've done and what they've gone through and how they've reacted to things.
Yeah, it's not an accident. We don't get we don't get struck by lightning. Okay, you got cancer. It's disease is 1,000% our fault in most cases, right? For people who are if a children is really sick, then that's got to do with the parents. But we've had over the last few years a lack of accountability on people for taking care of their own health care. And in doing so, they gave over their power. So we want to blame things. We want to blame 5G. We want to blame McDonald's. We want to blame all these things, which are valid. There's things out there that are certainly not helping us. But what's attracting you to McDonald's? What is it about? My father lectured with Dr. Emoto years ago, and the conversation turned to mercury amalgams. And, Dad said, more important than the mercury in your mouth is what attracted you to the mercury in the first place. So you're going down to either a deeper, rhythm to what's attracting these toxic chemicals to you. You don't go eat McDonald's because you're healthy. You don't go to McDonald's because you want to create health. There's an emotional reason behind why you're doing it. So we live in a society, we want to blame everybody. We want to blame things people can't even see, right? Or this doctor did this to me, or this person did that to me. And certainly a lot of these things are contributing, but it comes down to what's going on with ourselves. And that's kind of what we teach. Once you understand how the body works, then you can take accountability for your own health care and really take care of yourself. And then if you're going to a practitioner, you can hold them accountable as well.
Well said, Josh.
So how do you use the live blood analysis that you're using in your practice, I'll call it, and if that's not the right term, you can correct me, but what does that tell you, and what does it allow you to give to the person that you're analyzing as far as maybe some steps that they can take to address the things that are going on with them?
So, good question. And one quick clarification, which is a confusing experience for most people. What our dad did, what Josh and I do, is not live blood analysis. Live blood analysis is a brand. It's also known as nutritional microscopy. So it's a brilliant brand. We do analyze the blood live, but we don't do live blood analysis. So this confuses people, all right? What we do the holographic blood analysis, which is similar images, but a very different interpretation and philosophy. So for people listening, if you see images like what we're talking about, if they didn't come from us, it's not the same idea. Very different interpretation and philosophy. We are the only ones in the world who do what we do the way we do it. We have trained a few people throughout history. None of them we communicate with regularly. So if anyone is talking to people out there and saying, I learned from the Bigelsens and I do their work, I don't know who that person is potentially. So it's a strange one for us. Live blood analysis is going to do supplements and nutritional things, and we see a lot of different stuff. So aside from that, what do we do?
We really do. We do a really traditional French-German dark field microscopy. And we won't get into the difference between us and live blood analysis, but let's just say there are major, major differences in interpretations. Yeah. And we try really hard to distance ourselves from that community. So
there's no fear in what we do. And if you've seen over the last 4 years, lots of microscope images being shared with lots of fear experiences behind it. I know most of those people, and most of them are wrong. So there's no fear in what we do.
If you're a practitioner, whether they're using a microscope or not, is preaching fear, go see somebody else because they don't understand how nature works.
Yes.
So, sorry, go Adam.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Yes. So with what we do, we take a drop of blood from finger, capillary blood. Capillary is only big enough for one red cell to fit through at a time. And we see images that are much bigger than the red cells. So the images that we do see, if they're bigger than red cells, if they were actually physically in your bloodstream, you could potentially clog a vessel. You could have a stroke. So what we're seeing is not physically in the bloodstream. All right. And there's a little bit of a stretch with some of this. We are very rigorous and objective with what we do, but we do border on this metaphysical, wooey, because there's definitely some good stuff there, depending on what's going on. There's some interesting stuff there, we'll say, and there's some really solid things there. Mm-hmm. So we take a drop of blood. We see physical issues, energetic issues, emotional issues. All right. With Dr. Emoto's work with the water crystals, what he did with the water, he tried to do with the blood first. He was trying to show us how emotions affect us. And he wasn't able to do it with the blood. So when he found out about our father's work, he was thrilled. They lectured together in California. There's a great quote on the back of Dad's book from Emoto that it's his wish that our work be shared with the world. And Josh and I just had a Zoom yesterday with Dr. Emoto's son, talking about doing some things together, which is awesome. But the reality is the things we see are showing up for a simple reason that is not, we still don't understand the whole experience. So the reality is in our bodies, all matter vibrates at its own frequency. All right. This is something we know from actual real science that makes sense. So different organs, different frequencies, different tissue, different frequencies. And this is a beautiful symphony. Everything is working together. It's awesome. If something is out of balance, then it changes the frequency. And now we have like a dissonance in music. We have what's called a disturbance field, a focal disturbance. And the way holographic images or pictures are made, remember those little mirrors you used to get with like the skull on it, and then you break it and it has little skulls in every shard there? They're basically refracting light. Light is bouncing, and they're taking pictures of an interference field. So our microscope light doesn't go straight through the sample. We take the slide, put it there. Your typical bright field microscope light goes straight through. Our microscope bounces the light. So it's refracting in a way that holograms are made. And on that slide is that disturbance field, something in the body. And Josh would always say it's kind of like bats and dolphins with echolocation. Energy bounces off things, and we can see things. They can see things visually. And the images that we see in the blood will match the anatomy books. I've got images that are matching x-rays and matching sonograms and things like that as well. So,
and Eastern philosophy has been looking at holograms for years. So if you're looking at people who read your eye, your tongue, your ear, your foot, that's what they're doing. They're reading holographic imprints. And a lot of people just didn't realize there was one in the blood as well.
Right. And what's interesting too, Nirvani, is what we see is not always what you would expect to see. So Dad had patients that had the kidney issues and the heart issues. They've been all around the world to all the specialists, and they'd come to see Dad, and he'd look at their blood, and he wouldn't see the heart or the kidney. He would see the structures out of alignment. The heart and the kidney is the result. Mm-hmm. So he would look at the blood. Person says heart issues. He sees the blood. The body says align me. The blood says structure. We get to the osteopath. We align things, not forcefully, but gently. And then all of a sudden the heart issue goes away because the heart was the result. So yeah, what we see in the blood, we always see what we need to see. There's no secrets, as Dad would say.
And the holograms are just a very small piece of what we do, right? So there's really the basics that people have to understand, and this is where pleomorphism comes into play, which is starting to be taught a little bit more, and a lot of times we've seen it taught totally incorrectly, but it is coming a little bit more into the mainstream a little bit, which is nice in some ways. But very basic pleomorphism. Bechamp discovered these little particles he called microzymas. Everybody who's seen them since then comes up with a new name for them for some reason. They've been called bions. It's probably the most common one people know from Wilhelm Reich. But microzymas, it's our single most basic form of life. It's like our chi. It's like our prana. It's our life force. It exists in all living things, animals, minerals, plants. They all have these little particles, and we believe they create all life as we know it. Everything comes from this base particle, and they react and they morph based on your terrain. All right, so depending on what's going on in your terrain, the microzyma is going to morph into a bacteria, a very specific bacteria for what your terrain needs, not to attack you. Bacteria are like the body's vacuum cleaners. And it's really strange because the regenerative farmers, the permaculturists understand these things, and they can't make the connection to the actual health world as far as doctors go. So in the soil, we've worked with some regenerative farmers, and they said they've traveled the world. They've never, ever seen a soil that's deficient in nutrients, not once. The nutrients are always there. What's missing is the microbiology that's needed to process the nutrients. So what happens is the nutrients are bound in the soil, and the soil can't utilize them until the bacteria come along, the microbiology come along. They clean the soil, and their waste product, their crap, is nutrients. right? So, and that's the same thing that happens in our body. Without the microbiology, we can't process the nutrients that are readily available for us. And as much as people want to jump for a pill bottle, no, we're creating health internally, right? We don't get our health from a pill bottle, right? So the body, the soil creates a very specific bacteria to do a very specific job, and its waste product is nutrients. So its waste product is very, very important for you. If we start to get out of balance, right, there's a dam in the river becomes a pond, we start to stagnate, and our pHs start to shift, right? And when our pHs start to shift, now the bacteria is going to morph into a fungus, right? And so the fungus, as we know, the wonderful mycelium network that's going on, the mycorrhizal network, the fungus is out there cleaning the soil, nonstop cleaning the soil, right? And if you get to an end stage, what the fungus is going to do is help you decompose. And it's going to go back into the earth and create new life. And this is the same exact thing that goes on in our body. The body creates the bacteria to do a specific job. If we're there trying to kill it, it's going to morph into a higher valence. And now we're going to have deeper issues down the line that are going to be more fungal in nature. The fungus is not the problem. The fungus is there trying to help you, just like every other piece of microbiology. Even the parasites, when the bacteria start to, when there's a stagnation, the bacteria start to over-proliferate and become pathogenic, right? We don't believe in pathogens. That just means out of balance, right? So when they become out of balance, then the soil creates parasites. And they go in and they'll process the bacteria, and they clean up your mucous membranes. And one of the key things parasites do in our body and in the soil is clean up heavy metals, right? So they're performing all of these necessary things for us, right? In this world now, we're trying to blame parasites for all of our problems. And the alternative community loves to say, heavy metals are your problem, so here's your candida cleanse and your parasite cleanse.
Right.
Candida's main role is to clean up your heavy metals also,
yeah.
right? So let's take care of your heavy metals by getting rid of the things that are there to actually help clean up your heavy metals and convert them to organic material. So you can see kind of what's gone on here. Now, the beauty of pleomorphism that's not being taught a lot in the alternative community is that it can be reversed. So we remove that dam from the pond, and the pond becomes a nice flowing river again. Our pHs balance out. The fungus morphs back into a bacteria and then back into a healthy microzyma, and it can go and create new life somewhere else. So it's this beautiful dance, this beautiful symbiosis that goes on, and nobody's ever being attacked, okay? Everything is being regulated. It's not an immune system, it's a regulatory system. And that's a quick pleomorphism intro right there.
Yeah, that was a great lesson. Yeah, it was pretty informative few minutes that you packed in there. So thank you for that.
That's good stuff. It's a big deal. It's simple when you look at it. If there's blocks in the body, the things in our body change into bacteria and fungus to help us. We remove the blocks, things start to revert back to where they should be. Simple. Mm-hmm. My dad always said, health is simple. People are complicated.
Yeah, very true. Wise words. From my perspective, the training that I had and the career path that I've taken, dentistry loves to tell the germ theory story as, this be all and end all for all oral health problems. I mean, bacteria are the cause of everything that goes wrong in your mouth. And, they teach this in school. They teach it, if you go to continuing education courses after you've graduated, it's perpetuated. And then they teach you to teach all your patients this story as well. And so from that perspective, Josh, you just gave us a really good crash course in pleomorphism. But for both of you, Adam and Josh, you mentioned that you've had some experience with dental issues or people experiencing dental issues. What is your perspective, given what you do and how you do it, with regard to, the dominant paradigm in dentistry, which is bacteria are the cause of every problem that you can imagine? It's
a good question. We feel for doctors and dentists because they all went into this profession to help people. Is what we like to think, Yeah. Doctors want to golf on Wednesdays and drive Porsches, and there's nothing wrong with that, little things in life. But the training was wrong, unfortunately. The system's not broken. It works perfectly for those that created it. With us, we've seen the history. Dad loved the history. I can't remember, Josh, was it Carnegie or Rockefeller that died never having taken a pharmaceutical in his life? Right? This is a business, and the guy actually had a homeopathic physician that lived with him. All right, so this is a business. Now, the dental experience is interesting because teeth are a big deal. And Dad learned about this through some biological dentists. But it's been tough for us because even the biological dentists are changing some things. What you see, Nirvani, is this brainwashing experience of you paid for this education that's very valuable, and we have indoctrinated you into this germ experience, and now you have to do the continuing education where we're going to continue to beat it into your head, basically. With the dentists, the reality is they don't realize, the majority of them, how much what they do affects the rest of the body.
Yeah.
All right. For us, it's all connected. This is integrative, holistic medicine. All right. So what Dad saw with things like the meridians, a big deal. Energy runs through meridians. You've got meridians, Chinese medicine, thousands of years old. There's something there, whether people believe in it or not. There's something there, right? But the little pieces of evidence that Dad saw over time. I had an accident, a car accident, back injury, not very bad, but we know all the great body workers, and nothing would hold until we eventually went to the dentist in Canada who stabilized the structure of my mouth. Dad would say the mouth is the base of the temple. So if we can stabilize this, then things can line up. If the mouth is not stable, if we're missing certain teeth, things will move and things will shift. All right, this is where the writing reflex comes in. The brain needs to see on a level playing field. So if you're missing teeth, the mouth starts to collapse, the head shifts, but the body will adapt, and it doesn't care if you're Quasimodo as long as things can see level.
We found a lot of dentists haven't learned that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Dad lectures was IABDM in 2006, where he lectured at the International Academy of Biological Dentists up in Vancouver. And they had reached out to me recently. And initially we were a fan, but from what we've seen over the last bunch of years, dentistry is still, as you know, very much stuck in the germ theory world, that the germs are causing issues. And maybe part of the issue with people not being able to regenerate teeth is they're getting rid of all the microbiology.
Yeah.
Right. So that there's a couple parts. One, as Adam pointed out, the writing reflex. So as if the mouth isn't stable, the body cannot hold its stability. Right. We've actually fixed people's knees before by sending them to a dentist just to stabilize the actual mouth. Yeah. We've found certainly the biological ones are becoming cowboys. Now everything is a cavitation, and they're ripping out teeth left and right, and they're giving you 15 implants. Yeah. Right. So we're really, we're trying to get people more to a holistic dentist just to make sure whatever they're putting in their mouth is healthy, and then making sure they're working with the osteopath at the same time. Because we've seen so much damage come from the dental work itself, whether they're affecting the pituitary, the hypothalamus, the thyroid, they can affect it all, depending on how they actually, do the actual procedures. So it's been a tough one for us. And it was interesting. I'll tell the crystal story really quickly. We had a lady whose kid knocked out her two front teeth diving into a pool. And Crystal, she's great, and it's a lovely Australian lady, and she put the teeth back in herself, right? And took her to the dentist, and the dentist said, well, they're going to fall out. You have to take these antibiotics. So Crystal was taking one of our courses, and she was thinking, well, isn't it the microbiology that's helping them? Mm-hmm. So instead of taking the antibiotics, she actually packed it with comfrey, and she started swishing sauerkraut or juice around in the mouth, to get some. She was doing everything she could to get germs in there, right? And the teeth healed, and they're fine.
They rerouted,
Yeah.
Yes, they rerouted. So she realized if she would have done the antibiotics, it would have changed it doesn't actually kill the bacteria. It actually changes the morphology. And if it changes the morphology, then it's going to go to something that's not there to actually regenerate that area. It's going to be to something that's going to help that area decompose. So she realized that if she followed that protocol, then the teeth would have died totally.
Well, what's interesting, too, is, Crystal's story is great. She was a farmer, and she had done things with her goats with the teeth. And she thought, let's try this. And it was funny because the dentist said to her, you need to kill everything there and put in fake teeth. And she said, no, I want to do this. And wouldn't they reroot if we put the teeth, the roots back in the soil? And the dentist says, no. And she says, well, can you just do it? And he said, yeah. He said, but you're going to have to come back, and I'm going to have to take things out and redo things. And she said, great, then that's more money for you. So do it. And he did it a little begrudgingly, but yeah, the teeth rerouted. And then after we mentioned that story, my girlfriend was telling the story at one of her webinars, and we've heard multiple people have had this happen. So it's food for thought. This is the terrain. Can we put the roots back in the soil? Good question, right? So the teeth are very interesting. The meridians, there's a doctor that Dad worked with at one point. We won't mention names because he tried to steal Dad's work and it didn't work for him. But he looked at 140 of his breast cancer patients. And 137 of the women in the study had an issue, root canal, on the breast meridian. All right. The other 3 women in the study did not have root canal on the breast meridian, but they did have an issue with the same tooth. So 100% of the women in this study, there's a correlation. They actually put lidocaine in the tooth, and it went right through the tumor. So energy going from here to there, right, affecting things, definitely. And we've seen this before, too. The idea of the thyroid cancer person comes in to see us, and there's a big chunk of mercury on the thyroid meridian, and they remove that mercury, and things start to change. Toxicity on the tooth, really. And dentists are so interesting, Nirvani. Why is it, that they won't touch the mercury, but they'll put it in your mouth, right? I like to think that someone said, I think they're not doing that anymore. Are they still doing that?
I think it's much less common. I think many dentists are no longer doing it. I think, depending on when somebody started practicing, old habits die hard, but most of the newer ones don't.
Well, and what we know too historically is it's not that if dentists came out and said, oh, mercury is toxic, think of the amount of lawsuits that would happen. So doctors can't say they were wrong for many things, which is unfortunate.
Well, it's interesting due to my own, dental journey. It used to be we thought things kind of went both ways. If there's a block on the tooth, it's affecting the energy to the organ. But from Dad's teaching and my own personal process, it's the emotion that causes all illness as we know it. All right. That doesn't mean you can just work on the emotion. Okay. If the emotion causes a physical issue, you have to work on the physical. All right. So there's a whole movement curing your cancer with a positive mental attitude. You can't do that. You have to change your attitude. But the emotion has now caused a physical issue. You got to work on the physical to help you process the emotional.
Yeah.
Right. So I realized I kept having a problem on the large intestine tooth, and I had a bridge that went bad and an implant that went bad. So is the problem the dentist, or was the problem me internalizing my emotions? Right. So I think it's the emotion which weakens the meridian, which weakens the energy to the organ, which weakens the energy then to your tooth from there. So it starts with that base emotion. So as much as we want to blame it on the amalgam, it's why was the tooth, rotting in the first place? Yeah. The amalgam certainly didn't help it, and it made things worse. But as I started to really work on some of these emotional things that I was really repressing, my teeth are doing fantastic. I'm not having problems there. So as much as I want to say, oh, the implants failed, no, it was actually me who had failed in dealing with my emotions at that point. And the more I'm working with them, doing things like Qigong just to improve the flow through the meridians, get my body work, my acupuncture, and trying not to internalize the emotion so much, which is still a work in progress. Things are starting to really improve everywhere. And certainly I'm noticing, and the issues as far as my teeth go have been really dramatically improved.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm glad for you.
It's a good thing. We can empower ourselves and take some action. We can see some reactions, definitely. But the teeth are an interesting one for us. They've been a difficult one to deal with because of dentists. And in the United States, we know that they're not allowed to do anything below the neck.
Yeah.
We would go to Canada at the biological dentist who would do acupuncture before to relax my jaw.
Yeah.
And then for my mouth to be open for extended a period of time wasn't so traumatic. And afterwards, they're doing the cranial sacral work. And the emotional component to this, my girlfriend, when she went through her divorce, 13 cavities that year. The emotions definitely have something to do. Teeth are much more important and much more connected with the whole rest of the body. It's all connected is the thing.
Yeah.
And dental work is a tough one because it seems so brutal for us. Everyone's afraid. No one wants to sit in the chair. And the reality is, Nirvani, and nothing against dentists and what you're doing, but you beat us up a little bit. There's pliers and they're pulling on our face, and things like that. It's intense, But the cool thing is, we've got dentists now that are realizing these things. I got a dentist in Puerto Vallarta that took her first cranial sacral courses. So she'll work on the head, and as she jams things up, then she'll help open things up, and then her patients they're healing quicker. The dentists that are using the PRP and things like that. There's something happening. If we could get every dentist to get a little cranial sacral training, their patients are going to heal quicker, and it's going to be much less of a traumatic experience for them.
Yeah.
And even we're excited because we just found out about dentosophy, which is anthroposophical dentistry, right? It's like this combination of Rudolf Steiner stuff and dentistry work. And They're teaching it in Spain. They're very selective with who they teach, and they won't do online things. We're trying to connect with them to say, over the last few years, people need to do some online things. But our dentist in Puerto Vallarta just went and got some training. They're understanding how much the mouth is affecting everything else. And the little things, there's an appliance they use. Anna's son is using one. And as he's using it at night, he's not snoring as much and his posture is changing.
Yeah.
It's all really connected. So we appreciate what you do. We need dentists. We can't do these things on our own. But we're excited to see the evolution of what happens here with the dental experience.
It's needed. Just like in most of traditional medicine, that evolution needs to happen.
And I think just as a practitioner and, being connected with other practitioners, you're right. We don't learn. And unless you intentionally go and find out, you become really, like most aspects of medicine, you become so disconnected from what you're doing and how it affects the rest of the body. And I love what you said. Your dad used to say that this, your mouth is the base of your temple, if you view your body as a temple. And it's so true, because if anyone's ever had even minor dental work, like a little filling done as an example, if your bite is off on that filling, like if you're biting it a little bit too high, and this is like fractions of a millimeter, it could be the most painful, excruciating thing. It can ruin your life. Like you don't even want to eat anymore on that side. So it's so important and yet really underrated. And so it's really cool that you are combining all of these areas, the dynamics of our body, dentistry included, and finding a network of people that you can work with and that have the same philosophy that you do. And I hadn't heard of, was it dentosophy? Dentosophy. So I will look that up.
Yes, look it up.
The theory sounds fascinating. We're still trying to check to see if they're getting the results, obviously. But the philosophy is very non-invasive, which I like. You remember Jana, my friend, had her front tooth was crooked. Yeah. And the dentist wanted to do some weird procedure, and so I took her to the osteopath when I was living in Spain, and it literally took him about 30 seconds to straighten that tooth out. Yeah.
Wow.
And he didn't even touch it.
Wow.
Right. He just worked on the palate. And he just worked on the attachments to the tooth, and the tooth just straightened out, basically. And at the same point, I had some brutal dental work, and it actually had rotated my mandible. This holistic dentist wanted to have me on an Invisalign and things like that, and I wasn't going to do that. And the osteopath said, well, they can put braces on you, and as soon as you take your braces off, it's going to pull right back out of alignment. Because it's not the jaw that's the problem, it's the attachments that are pulling you out of alignment. So he was just straightening out my bite, manually in a very gentle way, which is really nice. You never force things back into alignment. The body doesn't like that. But very simplistic approach, But yeah, we always like these days, it's hard to get cooperations from dentists in the United States. They're only allowed to do certain things. So we make sure our people are seeing the osteopath before and after. Yeah. We teach them how to do lymphatic drainage. Get those channels opened. God forbid a tooth has to come out. Get those channels open. It's going to make that work much easier than afterwards. Make sure those channels are open, and it makes that dental work go a lot easier, So hopefully that's where things will be taken a little bit in the future. We're speaking at the Weston Price Conference this year in Utah, and we'll certainly be talking a little bit about dentists and some advancements that can be made that would make it a lot easier for a lot of us going into that dental chair. I have three goals, I have other goals in life, but there's three main goals: to never be in the dental chair again, to never be in a courtroom again, and to never ever be in a hospital.
Yeah, those are fair.
Right?
Motivations in life, right? Definitely.
So I'm working on it. But part of that is out of fear. And, I don't want to have fear to go to some place that potentially could be helping me.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in that, like you've mentioned the energetic components, the emotional components, of course, that manifests in a physical form within our bodies. How have you sort of managed to develop or continue like this really practical approach to addressing what's going on within people? Because especially what's happening now, I find a lot of the time is we're kind of waking up to this like overly materialistic, reductionist society that we've built. But then there are people, practitioners included, that are almost like swinging over to the more woo-woo energetic aspects, which are important, and they're just as real as our matter-based reality. But there is this sort of like meshing of those two worlds that needs to happen so that you can have a practical effect for somebody's life. So how have you two managed to be able to cultivate that?
Well, and it's an interesting one too, because, with Josh and I, we love sharing this information. I get to talk to people all the time, and I say the same things over and over and over, and I love it. The reinforcement. I was the elementary school teacher. I really like people. I want to support people. I want to live in a world with happy, healthy people. And it's been difficult because not everyone's interested in what we have to say. In the alternative experience, there's a lot of people making money off things that, we know that aren't necessary. So with us, navigating this we have no choice. Like, this is the life we were born into. So we do what we do, right? And as we chat with people, the ones that are ready and they come to us, it makes a lot of sense and people are thrilled. It's a little bit lonely sometimes because we can't talk about this with all of our friends and family members and things like that, But when the people like you come to us and we get to share this and generate some awareness, awesome. Josh, asking you to talk about the four bodies. When we're looking at things, Western medicine looks at the biochemical, right? The biomechanical. And there's more going on than that. The physical body is one thing. It's the supportive framework for the energetic flow. So we definitely work with body workers, people aligning the car, taking pressure off the plumbing and things like that. Digestive issues, many times we see structural issues putting pressure on the digestive system. So people altering diet and things like that, which they don't necessarily need to. I eat whatever I want to eat, which is great. I have to walk the walk and talk the talk. And if I eat a bunch of junk food, which I love, then I have to deal with the repercussions, right? But the physical body is important. The energetic body, right? This is a big deal, getting the energy to move, all right? The emotional things, definitely. The reality is if we have a physical issue, it affects our energy. Then we have the emotional, we get depressed. We question a higher power. If we have low energy, it affects us physically. Emotionally, we get depressed or irritated. Then we question the higher power. We've got the emotional issues. We break up with somebody. We get in a fight with the partner. It affects us physically, energetically, and then spiritually. So everything is connected. It's very easy for Josh and I to have conversations with people anytime, wherever they're at, based on what's going on with them, because we can come at it from all of these different angles.
That's where practitioners are missing. Everybody's a specialist, right? I do energy medicine or I do physical medicine, and if you're not taking care of all four bodies, the four bodies that we know of, your physical, your energetic, your emotional, and your spirit, if one of those is out of alignment, then the other ones are going to be out of alignment too. So you can't just work on one body, or you can't pretend that you're just working on one body. For us, our first step is always work on the physical, right? Sometimes it's just that simple. Align the body. Now you got pressure off the liver can do its job. Is there an energetic block? Work on the physical, right? Remove those blocks so the energy can flow. The spirit is kind of the culmination of all of those things. We start to go to that higher power to look for answers, or we start to yell at that higher power or love that higher power. If one of those other three bodies is off, we're going to start to have issues in that area as well. So the specialist has ruined medicine. You got your cardiologist and your pulmonologist. They never even talk to each other. You think the heart and the lungs work together? Everything works together. We work a lot with scar tissue. And when I went up north to work with other people dealing with scar tissue, I was horrified at what they were doing with scar tissue, right? Scars are a physical restriction, but there's a huge emotional component to that injury, right? There's an emotional reason why you had that injury or surgery in the first place. The injury was just the result of the emotional trauma, right? So you might have a tiny scar, but you had a horrifying experience with that. So that emotion is now stuck in that scar. So as you treat the scar physically, you're helping to release the emotions, and you're actually starting to release the energy in the area too. So what we saw is there's a rhyme and reason for when you go after certain scars. The blood helps us figure that out. There's simpler ways to figure it out too. A cranial worker can put their hands on you and figure out the dominant focus, the traction line. If you start to work on the wrong scar at the wrong time, you have the healing crisis. And contrary to popular belief, a healing crisis is not a good thing. The healing crisis is your practitioner's fault, right? That means they're pushing the wrong buttons. They're pushing things too hard. They're working on the wrong things, right? The body likes to heal at a very specific rate. So we would look at the blood and, it says, okay, the umbilical ligament needs to be worked on. which is not in many people's consciousness these days. And that's a powerful story there too. And the doctor would come out and say, oh, there was a gallbladder scar there too. So I treated that. Now the person's having an exorcism on the table, right? The body wasn't ready to release that scar yet. And gallbladder is rage. Who knows what led to that gallbladder surgery? And now that person is having a conniption on the table, and that is the practitioner's fault. So you work on the scar tissue, you align the body, you get the body working as good as possible so the person can now process the emotions. All right. If you have problems with anger, then you probably have some compression in your liver. You cannot process your anger if your liver is having issues, right? So you can go talk about all these emotions and things like that, but get the damn pressure off the liver so now the liver can process the emotions on their own. So one of the easiest ways to process your emotions is to work on the physical, right? So it's the very first step for us. And if the physical doesn't work, then you delve into certain things, other things. You start to add different things to the equation. But it's a very simplistic approach. We tend to recommend osteopathy and something Eastern like an acupuncture. Those are the two things we recommend the most. It's different for everybody. The reason you would get sick is the difference between Adam and I getting sick are totally different reasons. So you have to figure out that unique individual. And there's no protocol, right? I can't just say, oh, you've got this condition, here's your supplement. So it's a very simplistic process, but I think the specialists have ruined things. You need to look at the person, the individual. You need to look at their terrain, what's going on in their environment, and then you put the puzzle pieces together, and then it's really easy from there. Mm-hmm.
Well, and the interesting thing, too, is, just to add to that real quick, is not everyone's interested in holding themselves accountable. It's funny how many of our friends we could help, but they're not really interested. It's easier to just buy into, I take a pill and I get fixed, and that's that. So with what we talk about, it's very empowering. You read our dad's books and you'll never think the same again. Yeah. And there's actionable items all over the place, but it's really interesting. Humans, we're strange creatures. We gather for sunsets. Self-abuse is a wonderful thing for us, So part of it is that Josh doesn't even go out anymore. Josh hangs out at the beach by himself with the crows, and so this way he doesn't have to have some of these conversations with people who aren't really interested in hearing what they need to hear.
Hey, Adam's the people person.
I'm the people person. Yeah. But I appreciate people. I like them. Not everyone's ready to hear what they need to hear, and that's part of our conversations with them. Is you're ready to hear what you need to hear. And it's when people are ready, it's just so nice to me how much life can make sense.
Yeah.
And there's so much less confusion. Josh and I don't look at our blood very often. We typically know what's going on and why we have our issues, and no one's perfect. We're all a work in progress. So, Josh and I have our own work that we have to do as well. But the reality is when you start to listen to the body, when we do consultations with people, when people read these books, they can look at things differently. They can take some action. They start to understand reactions, and they become much more autonomous. For me, the reality of health is this. What is health? Health is freedom. If I want to play tennis, the legs got to work. If I want to go out and eat a steak, the stomach, the digestion's got to work. So as we support this system, then my body, my spirit, we can go do things and experience life, which is awesome. And you've seen so many of us, so many people that their life is dealing with their health issue.
Yeah.
Even to the point where I remember Josh, the one cancer patient with Dad, and she was done. And, Dad, she didn't have to come back anymore. There was no more cancer. And she said, well, do I need to come back? And Dad said, no. And she said, what do I do? And he said, go live your life. And she had spent so much of her life just consumed by this issue of hers that she forgot what to do with life. This is food for thought for anyone that's listening too. When we're all going through health issues, it's a focus, but it can't dominate everything. We need to get joy in our lives and our days, and we need to live our lives.
Yeah.
If you've been diagnosed with something.
He would say, if you're too busy living or creating, you have no time to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you've been diagnosed with something, if you've been given a label, do you buy into that? Do you wear it like the badge? It's been difficult. People get involved in the Lyme disease club. They're invited to the group, and now they're included and they're part of something. And the breast cancer awareness groups, I had a friend who got breast cancer, and Dad fixed her, and then they kicked her out of the group. and then they didn't really want to hear, and that was really strange for her, So it's nice when we have people that ask us these questions, and it's been an interesting one. Josh and I both with the TMJ, we have to keep our mouths shut very often, because people don't want to hear what we have to say. You can get in trouble for saying some of these things. So this is one reason where when we get the chance, Nirvani, we talk.
Yeah. No,
we're like little wind-up buddies, We'll go. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it is so true. Like that, inability to speak whatever is true for you and have to keep your mouth shut. I mean, that manifests in so many people as issues with their TMJ. So that's not, you're not alone in that, but you have a lot to share. And so it's amazing that you've accumulated this lifetime of knowledge and experience and working with people, and you now have the ability and the groundedness in what you've done all of these years to do that. So thank you for that. I've read, and this was maybe 4 years ago or so, 3 or 4 years ago, I read your father's book, Doctors Are More Harmful Than Germs. And he talks, I think there's a whole chapter where he just kind of goes through the impact of surgery and what that does to the body and the tissues and what gets stored. We were just talking about scar tissue and the emotional aspect of getting things kind of trapped in that tissue. And I mean, he was educating people about that years ago. And it is true that, we store so much in the body, and especially when we're traumatizing ourselves in this way, it ends up bound up inside of us. And sometimes it is just a matter of having somebody like yourself or Adam be able to say, here are some emotional threads that could be actually like weaving into how that's showing up in your body. And I think we're now just kind of coming into an understanding of how important that actually is, that understanding of the emotional component to our health and to our disease.
Yeah, and it's I mean, luckily it's something that we've kind of grown up with. But yeah, the emotion, like I said, is 1,000% behind why we get sick. But knowing how to deal with the physical issues is a different story. So whether it's the scar tissue or the head injuries, the dental traumas, things like that, you have to work on the physical part of it to release the emotion, so, and that's where I think a lot of the emotional gurus are missing. We can't just sit there and pray away our cancer. I believe in praying. It's an energy.
Yeah.
Right. But you got to get off your butt and you got to do some physical work as well.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the brilliance of Dad is he really traveled around and saw all these different modalities and he put the puzzle pieces together. And a lot of people have a great puzzle piece and they think that's the only puzzle piece. So they're out there yelling and screaming, this is the way you have to do things, but it's an incomplete puzzle when they're done with it. They're just working on the physical. They're just working on the emotional. They're just working on the energetics. They're not completing the pie, so to speak. And that was the brilliance of our dad. And that's been one of the harder things to get across with practitioners. And I feel for them to some degree because they're so regulated. Certainly in the United States, if you have a licensure board, you can only do what the licensure board says you can do. Yeah. And Dad was brought up on charges for curing somebody illegally, right? They didn't care that he cured the person, right. Not that he cures anything. He support the body heals itself. But it was literally illegal to cure people. And he got in trouble for it. So understanding the emotional component is key, but understanding how to actually deal with it and release that emotional component is just so paramount these days because we see a lot of people with really good intentions work on the emotional things, and all they're doing is bringing that emotion to the surface, and they're not releasing it. So it's just this constant loop, and people are really stuck in their loops these days. They're stuck in their narrative, mm-hmm. And I'm working on it, myself as well. But if you don't work on the physical, then you get stuck in that loop. Right. So you have to work on all of those to help release that emotion. And that's, I think, where a lot of practitioners are missing. They've got a good piece of the puzzle and it's an incomplete puzzle and they're not getting the results that are actually needed.
Yeah.
But there's big movements, about it these days. And Dad was talking to a very well-known person back in the day. I won't mention names anymore. Anytime I mention a name, They call and they yell at Adam because nobody can get a hold of me. Nobody can get a hold of me. The person was trying to tell Dad to, he was going through a tough time, and they're like, just try, doing positive manifestations and do these things, And Dad finally got pissed, because this lady was part of the movement that was trying to cure cancer with a positive mental attitude.
Okay.
And he finally said, you know what he calls his clients who try to cure their cancer with a positive mental attitude? Corpses. Right? So very extreme, right? But you have to change your attitude, right? But you have to do some physical work now. There's a physical problem. So it's got to be a combination of things.
Yeah.
But we see people, they want to sit in the chair and say, Jesus, save me, or they want to sit in the chair and just do positive manifestations, and they go back to eating their McDonald's and they go back to their same old lifestyle. And that's just not the way it works.
Yeah.
All those things can be very powerful for you if done the right way.
Yeah. If you've got something that's growing out of the side of the neck that's impeding on passageways, maybe you do need to cut that out while we support the body naturally. In his book, Doctors Are More Harmful Than Germs, he talks very well about it's the trauma surgeons, the ER doctors, the nurses. There's definitely something there. And Dad would say, I'm not Eastern or Western. He was integrative. It was a combination of what needed to be done. And the emotional thing, though, is such a big deal. We're emotional creatures. And we're emotional creatures. We're creatures of habit. And this is when the doctor doesn't see the emotions on the clipboard. They're looking at tests and numbers and things like that.
Yeah.
But the emotions are affecting our pH. That's important. So joy is one of the biggest things. Dad would write a few things. He gave up his medical license, and there were a few things he would write on a prescription pad. And one of them was joy. And it was neat. There was a guy that was a patient of his, was a prostate cancer patient. And he did documentaries, and he was interviewing our dad. And he said, Doc, how do we avoid this? How do we avoid the cancers and things like this? And he said, well, cancer is a mold, and mold requires certain oxygen environment and certain pH. And pH is very important to the body, to the terrain. He said, the thing that changes your blood faster than anything and your pH faster than anything is joy. And he said that very seriously. And he said, the thing is this, I can't just tell you to get joy. You need to know what brings you joy. Yeah. And I have this conversation with a lot of people, and I say, what brings you joy? And a lot of times they go, wow, that's a tough one. I don't know. And this is it. If emotions are a big deal for us, we're emotional beings, we need to practice joy. Michiko Hayashi is the director of Dr. Moto's Peace Project, and there were studies done that say we have 60 to 80,000 emotional episodes every day. All right. You're on a phone call and you're laughing and you're crying and you're angry and you're sad. These things happen just like this. But the reality is, they said 80% of the emotions we experience are negative. And over the last 5 years, maybe even more so with all the confusion and the fear that's been going on. So the reality is we need to practice joy. Yeah. And the bigger reality is we've earned it, we deserve it, and it's good for our health. It's changing your pH. And diet is one of these things that we can control. And everyone's all convinced that it's the pH and the diet, the alkaline diets and things like that. It's not. It doesn't work that way. There's so much acidity in the stomach, no matter what you're doing alkalinity-wise, that's not the way. But the joy is very important. And our dad was friends with Atkins, from the Atkins diet. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people lost weight on that diet, more people than any other diet, but a lot of people gained weight on that diet also. Everyone's unique.
Right.
All right. But the joy, our dad would say, when you're going to give a child a cupcake, the amount of joy in that child getting that cupcake is much more beneficial to their health than the sugar is detrimental. Don't give them the whole damn box of cupcakes. All right. One every once in a while, these little treats that bring us joy is important. And the list of joy is homework for all of us. 10 things that bring you joy. Ride a bike, take a walk. Me, my guitar, thank God for my guitars. They bring me joy. A chocolate milkshake, tacos bring me joy. I can't eat them all day, every day. Moderation's important. And
that's different for everybody. And Dad was very left brain for him. So for him to break everything down into science and talk about joy is regulating things, and you had to mention pH and how wrong everybody is at talking about pH these days. The thing that balanced out things the most was actual joy. And if practitioners are out there treating the pH, they're treating the result. They're not treating the cause of the issues. Mm-hmm. All the pH is doing is telling you a direction the train is going. Are you rotting or you're rusting? That's all it's telling you. And they have it totally backwards. Now that you mentioned it, Adam,
Yeah.
I got to get on my high horse and say it for a second.
Go, Josh.
Your diet only controls 2 to 5% of your pH. That's it. Your kidneys and lungs control your pH, right? And if you want to delve deeper into it, it's the emotions associated with those. It's your fear and your grief and sadness that control your pH. And on the other hand, it's your joy and love for life that controls your pH. Yeah. So the other one, too, is Dad was known for his cancer work, and every single one of his cancer clients had highly alkaline blood. And now this is the confusion, so we have to mention it. People are taking their urine pH and thinking, oh, they're acidic. Well, the urine is your waste product, and there's benefits in the waste product, right? When you become stressed, your cells become acidic. And they dump alkaline waste. All right. And people talk about the blood. Your blood is 55% plasma. This is your river of life. Right. So the cells become acidic. They push out alkaline waste. So your terrain is now alkaline. Right. And your waste product, right, is cleaning out the actual waste product. Is going to be, if your blood is alkaline, your waste product is going to be acidic. So people are testing their urine thinking they're acidic when in actuality, their terrain is alkaline. So we're lucky, actually, that your diet doesn't contribute too much to your pH, because these be causing a cancerous environment all over the world right now with this alkaline movement. All right. So every single one, as we talk about the pH, we talk about the blood pH. It's very different from the urine and the saliva. Every single one of his cancer clients had a highly alkaline pH. Our blood is supposed to be towards the alkaline side in balance, not highly alkaline. They found when they got the actual blood pH under 7.35, cancer could not exist. And you can go to any traditional doctor out there, have them do a pH test on your venous blood. If you have cancer, it's going to be 7.5, 7.55 or higher. Vincent found it was all 7.6. So we see people are really close to the truth, and then it's exactly wrong. And then we get so many people altering their lifestyle based on some misinformation. And a lot of times it can cause damage, but we're lucky that your diet doesn't control too much of your actual pH.
Yeah. And the fun thing is this too, Nirvani. You want to control your pH? Here's a great exercise. If you could be anywhere in the world doing anything at all and money wasn't an issue, where would you be and what would you be doing? All right. The first is, can you answer that question? Can you answer that question? Where would you be? What would you be doing?
That's a really good question. I would be near an ocean somewhere. And I would be probably reading under the sun by an ocean.
Nice. Now, as we're all watching and listening, to look at the change in your face, you know what I mean? Now, just think about it for a moment. Think about going to the beach and lying on the beach and reading that book. This is changing the pH.
Yeah.
You know, these little things of focusing on that joy. And as much as I want to go to the beach all the time, beach for me, definitely. Not reading at the beach. I'm going to go surf. Yay. But visualizing these things, these are the meditations we can do. You know, and when we would do presentations, Josh and I, we would say that, if you could be anywhere at all doing anything, think about it for a moment. A lot of people can't answer the question is one thing, which is interesting. But then the people that can, you always hear someone sigh. So that's some tension that was released, right? That's some grief that can be released. The lungs are releasing. They're relaxing. So these are the little things, we're very, like I said earlier, very rigorous about what we do, very objective about what we do. And we border on this interesting airy-fairy, wooey-wooey. My girlfriend is a research scientist. She worked in a nanobiotechnology laboratory, right? She's worked with infectious diseases and all these things. Very much smarter than I am. Kind of intimidates me sometimes.
Infectious, with quotes.
Right, yes. She's a very intense research scientist. And someone asked her during an interview, he said to her, what do we do? Same thing, like asking my dad, how do we be healthy? And she said, take off your shoes, go outside, and hug a tree. Yeah. The negative ions that we get, the electrical experience, the grounding that we're getting from nature. This is coming from a scientist. This is not what I would expect her to say. But that's important. What we can learn from nature. Just taking off our shoes does something electrically. You can hold, a voltage meter and see yourself grounding. It's really neat, and for most of us, if we could just lie on the grass for a little bit each day, how many people listening? Oh, if we could just lie on the grass. Yay. Go do it. And you can find just a little patch of grass. It doesn't need to be a big patch of grass, But it's really about these little things, the joys in life. With joy, there's less tension. With less tension, things flow. The basics of health of sympathetic and parasympathetic. A rabbit, prey, senses a predator, a coyote, and it goes into that sympathetic. It tenses up and it inhibits bodily functions, so it's less detectable by the predator. All right? So then the coyote goes by and the rabbit shakes it off. We don't. We hold on to crap forever. It's crazy what we do as humans. Our tension. You scratched my CD once. I'm going to hold it against you forever. And that little bit of irritation doesn't help digestion. I had a burrito once. I live in Mexico and I love Mexico. And the food, awesome, right? And one of these burritos was a bacon-wrapped shrimp burrito, right? And this was actually in Tijuana. This is like the definition of food poisoning, Don't go to Tijuana and eat bacon-wrapped shrimp burritos. Burrito was delicious. Why did I throw up later on? Was it the burrito? No, it was that idiot I was having the argument with during my lunch. My emotions, how many of us, the emotions go to the stomach and we get nauseous? Right?
Yeah.
I can't stomach this. There's a lot of old phrases in history too. The gall of somebody, and affects the gallbladder, things like that. You're a pain in my neck, and all of a sudden there's a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
Right? So these little things, joy is really, see how seriously I say this. Joy is very important for us. Get some damn joy. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think that is a really powerful and beautiful place to wrap this conversation up. And I say that because we've spent this whole time talking about your work and the things that you've noticed, and I know that there is a lot of intention that's gone into it over decades of time between your father and the two of you. But to just end off with something so simple and powerful as to say, bring joy into your life. And if you don't know what that is, then figure that out.
Yes.
How simple and how important for all of us.
Yeah. It's the little things in life. And really, the basics of it, align the car. We align our car once or twice a year, align the body. All right. The oil changes, the tune-ups. Right? If we can get to the osteopath and align the body gently and release strain patterns, get to the acupuncturist, supports the energetic experience, the emotional experience, understand how disease happens, and get the joy in our lives. That simple recipe there, and then see how things start to shift. Let us know what happens.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal of our teachings, is to get people out of the rabbit hole. Because people are quick to go down there, and that's fine, but you got to make sure you come out of the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And that's why we're such terrible salesmen, Adam. We've got a couple courses that we do, so that are based on Dad's books. So there's the holographic blood book, which is not a blood course. We do not teach the blood at this point in time. As you go through our courses, there's going to be a blood basics course you can take upon approval, because we're really concerned about making sure people who have integrity understand the science before they actually sit behind a microscope. Mm-hmm. But we've got a couple 13-week courses. One just started last week, The Hidden Side of Healthcare. It's based on Dad's Doctors Are More Harmful Than Germs book. And while we do delve into the history of medicine, the book is really more about solutions. Then we've got our Intro to Terrain course, which will be in October. We've got our School of Health, which is we do a couple webinars a month. We do one interview. So we've had acupuncturists, we've had osteopaths, we've had some naturopaths, we've had farmers on there, and then we'll do a Q&A. It's very interactive. So all the courses we have in the School of Health are designed to give you access to us, because people who know me in the real world don't get access to me. Or Adam, a little bit more so. But it's a really nice community. There's never any arguing or bickering. It's a really cool happening when you come to one of our webinars, because as Adam would say, we don't have all the answers, right? But between all of us, we can come up with the answers. Mm-hmm. So we have these wonderful discussions, and where people are missing these days is people aren't open to the discussion anymore.
Yeah.
Here in the United States, the Republican never talks to the Democrat. Yeah. The alternative person never talks to the traditional person, right? They're right, and that's all there is to it. So our webinars are really about having that discussion, which is really nice. So for people out there, if you want to be a part of it, it's a really cool community. And you get to meet people. Maybe we've got a fair amount of people from Canada, which is great. We've got a great big Aussie contingent, a lot of people from Spain right now. So it's a very international community, but they're all really good people. And it's actually helped me heal emotionally in a lot of ways, because we felt so isolated.
Yeah.
And then during COVID, or whatever you want to call it, we felt even more isolated.
Yeah.
So when you realize that there are people that you could talk to out there, unfortunately, we have to get online to do it, but it's really nice. So I feel like I have this really cool extended family now that I didn't have before we started doing these.
Right. And the last thing we'll say here too, Nirvani, is we like to be accessible. People have questions. There's only so many questions we can answer until we look at a drop of blood. And the reality is the answers are in the blood.
Well, thank you. That is perfect. I think that's a perfect place to wind things down. And I will link Bigelsen Academy in the show notes. So for anyone wanting to explore or learn more about what you're doing on a regular basis, all of the things that you both outlined, it'll be available.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for having us on and for helping us generate some awareness.
Yeah, thank you for your time today. This was awesome.